Good afternoon. Yeah, it works. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Vivienne King. I am an operating board member of Revo, and I am also head of real estate social impact at the Good Economy Social Impact Consultancy. Welcome, and thank you for being here for this session. I'm reliably told that everyone else who's left has gone to get a coffee because they want to be really alert for this particular session because it's the best one coming. I'm delighted to be chairing this panel, which is all about the S in ESG and what that means for the commercial real estate industry. The previous panel did focus on how our approach to town centres has fundamentally altered, and that, of course, has shifted how we perceive our role in nature and in communities. So in this panel, we will talk about the relationship of the built environment to the communities that the built environment is operating in. Social impact is core to the United Nations drive for sustainable cities. The experience of the business community to deliver sustainable benefits for society is only heading in one way, and that's upwards. Society expects us to be good corporate citizens. The next gen, we've heard, thinks it's business as usual. Codes of conduct, disclosure requirements, and legal obligations are mounting. And the impact fund world is increasing exponentially. But creating social impact can feel complicated. It's intangible. And in this session, we will be trying to demonstrate how it's not so complicated, and it's something for everybody. Trust in the fact that a holistic approach to value creation is the way of the future. So I'm very grateful to our fabulous panel for joining us today. There's an immense depth and breadth of experience up here, so please do put your questions through as we run through the session, through the Slido. In a moment, I will be asking the panel to introduce themselves and also to say a little bit about their businesses and give us a 5-minute snapshot of how they are accelerating social impact in our industry. But before I do that, there is a question that's going to come up on Slido. It's going to come up now, and it's going to come up at the end of this discussion, just to see how attitudes have shifted. So, if you would please click on the QR code there, and let us have your answers to this question. Before we get started, I'll give you a moment. The panel can do it too, if you like.
Oh, right. Let's get it.
Oh, my, look at that.
Okay.
Oh, you don't need to present.
Let's see. Whoa. Well, that's fabulous. So now you just need to know how to be even better. Right. Okay. Well, I just hope it doesn't go down. That would be bad news. Okay, fine. Thank you all very much for that. That's terrific. And we will now get started. So I'm going to hand over to each of the panel members, as I say, to give us a short presentation on their business, and then we'll get stuck into the panel discussion. So, Sarah, you're kicking off. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vivienne. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Sarah Forster. I'm the CEO and co-founder of The Good Economy. And I have to say, I told Vivienne as I walked in, retail real estate is a whole new world for me, actually. I come from a background in sustainable development. But I'm just going to give you a brief introduction about the work of The Good Economy and what we're doing that's hopefully relevant to you. So we are a specialist impact advisory firm. I mean, we've got a mission to enhance the contribution of business to more inclusive and sustainable development in the UK and also internationally. And we work primarily with investors, but also enterprises who want to make kind of impact creation, particularly the S in ESG, social impact, integral to their business strategy. So this next slide, I was like, oh my God, this is not a great starter slide, is it? But, you know, there's a lot of an alphabet soup, really, of definitions and frameworks that can get very confusing. And I think everybody's, heard about ESG. Other terms that are used a lot of social value and social impact. And just really just to distinguish those a little bit, social value really is really thinking about, what is, the built environment is obviously so fundamental to communities, to people's lives. And this is saying that the built environment, in terms of what it how it does contribute to economic, social, environmental well-being, and it's important to understand that. Social impact is getting beyond social value to saying, okay, how can we intentionally have a social impact, and trying to sort of support specific outcomes. And particularly in real estate, we've seen new strategies about how do we tackle the crisis of affordable housing, for example, and actually deliver on genuinely affordable housing. And I think what's exciting today on the panel, we have new strategies about how do we deliver more impact in retail and broader real estate sectors. So for many people, ESG, social value, is about disclosure and risk management, but it's increasingly becoming about impact creation and making business about delivering not just financial returns, but also social returns. But why do we care? So why we care, climate change is the big reason why we all have sort of mobilized around the E. I think for us, why we all need to mobilize around the S is the reality that the UK has the worst social and spatial inequality in the whole of Europe. We are the most regionally divided country. We have poverty levels, about 12.5% of our population live in poverty. So we're the worst in Europe. That's where we sit. And, this isn't just a north-south divide. We have those red areas, pockets, the areas with the least economic prosperity and the highest poverty rates. But what you'll see in London, as we all well know, is we also have although it's very prosperous, we also have very high levels of poverty. And what we would argue is that, I work on Africa as well, right? Why on earth, as one of the richest countries in the world, do we have this? It shouldn't be like this. And I think today, with the recent budget, it is so important that we invest in our own country. And what we argue is actually part of the reason for this is that the UK has not invested in our own backyard. We're very good at exporting capital. So it's good to have some investors here. We did a big initiative. We run collaborative projects about how do we mobilize more investment for place-based impact. And partly that was sort of founded by looking at, well, where does our pension money go? And we looked at where local government pension money went. We did a Freedom of Information Act and actually showed that 97% of local government pension money, which you think, some of that be invested locally, was in the global capital markets. Right? Very little is invested in real economy sectors. So we created this pillar model. So can we get more into, housing, regeneration, clean energy, sectors that actually provide real investment opportunities and can deliver returns to investors, but also would really help drive local and regional economic development. And the wheel was saying that needs to start bottom up. It needs to start in place with stakeholder engagement and understanding what do people want in their own places? What do they want the communities to be? So then, very briefly, what we do is help, our clients develop what we call impact measurement and management frameworks. And this is about working with them to be really intentional about the impact they want to create. That becomes part of their strategy. To look how they can create additionality beyond business as usual, but beyond what the market would deliver anyway. To integrate into their strategies ways of delivering additionality and then reporting and learning from that. And we see these that there are sort of building blocks to an impact strategy. So a bit like you have a financial management plan, you have an impact management plan. It becomes it's a disciplined approach. It's not bean counting how much value you've created. It's actually a disciplined approach to managing for impact and learning and achieving positive impact. So given 5 minutes, very briefly, we actually think this is a paradigm shift. We think there is a sentiment shift in the market. We've got investors today who I think would agree that people care more about the world we live in and that private markets can be a force for good. But, what we've lived in actually is a sort of, world where real estate has been financialized, right? Even our own homes become about, how much they're worth. We've got global markets where people are sort of bidding on properties when they don't even live in that place. So we've financialized the real estate market. How do we bring it back to being about long-term social, environmental, and financial value creation? How do we move from ESG compliance to really thinking about impact and what that means for the models we work with? And what we believe is that really requires, government and business leadership. Stop throwing stones at the public sector or the private sector. Work together. Make a real difference. And I leave with a quote, and I understand he's even in the room, that really, the future of retail is it needs to be driven by people and places and not solely real estate, and we entirely agree. Thank you.
Hi. So just as a brief introduction, I thought it would make sense to introduce myself and explain why it's me standing here today rather than one of my esteemed colleagues. So my name's Tim. I'm an asset manager at Ellandi, but the reason why I'm here today is through my role as chair of the Vision Board. Ellandi's vision is to create the UK's most sustainable and inclusive communities. It's the role of the Vision Board to hold Ellandi to account to stay in line with that vision. As chair, I sit on the Ops Board, which enables me to hold Ellandi to account to ensure that all decisions that we make as a business are in line with our vision. The other part of my role as chair of the Vision Board is to manage all the various activities that we run through the business itself, but also through our portfolio. As you can see, oh, that's gone wrong. There we go. As you can see, we're working towards B Corps. We hope to be certified with B Corps by the end of next month, which is really exciting. But B Corps is just one of the projects that we're running across the portfolio and throughout the business. Social impact is at the heart of everything that we do at Ellandi. Clearly, there are a number of things that we can do as a business, but the most important thing that we can do, and the biggest impact that we can have, and our greatest opportunity to make real change, is through our portfolio and through the projects that we run. Looking at the slide, it may seem as though there's more emphasis on what we're doing at Ellandi rather than what we're doing through our portfolio, but that isn't quite right. What this is it creates a framework for us to be able to run projects effectively across our entire portfolio and capture all of the data and all of the analysis from the social impact that we're creating at each of the schemes. A lot of the projects that we run across the portfolio are the same projects that all of us as asset managers have been running throughout our schemes for a number of years. They're supporting food banks or providing space for communities to sit and chat, whether it's knitting or fixing lawnmowers or whatever it might be that they need to use that space for, to help bring that community together. These are all things that we've been doing for a long time, and it's something that we're really proud of. It's something that we've been winning awards from Revo for a number of years. But what does it all mean if we can't value that impact? What we're doing at Ellandi to try and help give it a bit more meaning is putting together a model with Social Value Portal where we can work on a method of giving these activities and the way in which we run the shopping centres a real value. We're in the process of measuring the social impact across 19 of our shopping centres. Interestingly, only 3 of those are owned by local authorities. The other 16 are owned by private sector investors who have taken a little bit more persuasion to understand the benefit and the importance of measuring that social impact. But now that they're fully on board, we've managed to engage with the Social Value Portal, who have created a social value measurement toolkit, which enables us to score each of our assets and put a pounds and pence figure on each of the schemes. The social value created from each of the assets isn't just through those community projects, though. It's through the way that we manage those centres. It's by minimising waste and reducing carbon emissions. It's through the jobs that we create and the way that we employ people. And it's looking at our entire supply chain. Within shopping centres, it's just not the way that we manage our own assets, but it's looking at the way that occupiers manage their operations within the schemes as well. So we have to collaborate with them to make sure that we can gain the total impact created from those schemes. And whilst it's interesting grading each of the assets and getting a value in pounds and pence, what we're really using this for is to create a base so that we can put action plans in place on each of the assets. and put KPIs in place for our centre management teams, our property managers and our asset managers, so that we can continue to improve year on year to do better and create more impact from the assets that we can manage. So while regenerating town centres to be the places that they need to be for the future is going to be a key part of social impact investing over the next few years, it's not going to be possible to redevelop all the town centres across the country. And it's in those locations that can't be redeveloped that we need to focus our time and efforts so that the managers and the occupiers and the owners can be fully aligned to maximise the impact that's created at each of those schemes. The only way that we'll know what we're doing is creating a positive impact is by analysing it and measuring that change. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charlie Royal, and I work for a company called AEW. We're a top 10 global investment management company throughout the globe. I've got a brief run-through of an example of an asset that I recently purchased in the AW UK Urban Real Estate Fund. And then I'm going to review the difference between and the similarities of social value investing and place-based impact investing. The AW Urban Real Estate Fund was created to invest mainly in underutilised retail accommodation throughout the south of England and major UK conurbations. At purchase, we review alternative uses which could be used for demand and supply in the short, medium and long term. One asset we purchased at the very beginning of the fund was Windsor Yards in Windsor. A great location, good tenant lineup, but a lot of vacancy. About 60,000 square foot of vacant space. And as you can see here, it doesn't look very attractive in a key town centre in the UK. The store had been vacant for a number of years, and the story goes, it was a department store, a Phoenix department store, which got relocated to Bracknell. So during and post-purchase, we undertook a lot of key local engagement meetings with local communities, businesses and councils to determine what alternative uses they would like to benefit the local community, and therefore improving the social value of this location and subsequently improving the quality of life for the local community. A master plan was created over a period of 12 to 18 months, which you can see on the right of the slide. One benefit of this scheme is that it's an open-air scheme, so we don't have that enclosed shopping centre environment, which are a more challenging asset to repurpose. During the engagement process, we learned that the night economy had been a focus for the local council for a while and a number of stakeholders. They have a lot of visitors in the daytime, but not many visitors stay for the evening economy, and there was a shortage of hotels. Therefore, we spoke to Travelodge, who are a tenant of ours, who wanted to expand, and we're working with them to do so at the moment. But also in the south of the site, where we've got more chance to repurpose derelict retail, we're working with a number of hotel operators to increase the beds in the local economy. Furthermore, locals also wanted a cinema. What do we do in the evenings, and where do we go? And I feel a cinema benefits all age groups, subsequently improving the social well-being of a large section of the community. The remaining underutilised space to the south of the development can accommodate a range of uses: residential, office and senior living. Each would create social value to the local community and the economy, and therefore we are reviewing the feasibility of each use at the moment. It goes without saying, with social value and impact, that all developments will have excellent green credentials. I think the ongoing transformation of Windsor Yards ticks a number of social value investing criteria, including people, planet and place of the SDGs, which includes the creation of an estimated 700 jobs when the development will be delivered, plus a return for our investors, which is obviously key to any investment we make. So I'm now going to talk about the difference between what I feel in terms of social value, but now place-based impact investing, which is focused on the most deprived locations in the UK, and something at AW we're working on and looking at the moment. The uses are very similar, as you can see from the slide, a number of uses you'll all be familiar with. And we included affordable and community space retail. However, it's these targeted uses in specific locations which are the challenge to improve these locations once you have delivered a development. And I'll work you through a process we've been working on with Sarah and the Good Economy to demonstrate how we go through this process from the start. And this is a working model, so we're refining it as we go. But it's very similar to what we would do initially, identify an underutilised real estate asset, and then work through the process, the opportunities, and then we introduce an impact assessment. This will then test, before the asset is inspected and analysed in further detail, how much impact we will make by investing in this asset and what we need to do to improve the asset. We then go through on the journey to repurpose it, and then the difference is we then measure it and continue to measure it with the assistance of the Good Economy, and that then tells you on an annual basis how much impact you're making annually. So there's a lot more detail. And to demonstrate that level of detail, I thought I'd include what we've started as a very, very draft impact screening for a shopping centre. Lots to take in on the slide, I'm not going to go through it all. But I just wanted to show that these are the 5 key points in terms of objectives and how we go through each step to then measure. And then once we measure and we've got a score, we can then determine how that score affects the impact. And we've initially set a benchmark of 300 out of 500 to say, yes, we'll move to the next stage of this asset. But place-based impact investing is a significant amount more work, but has a lot more reward in the most deprived areas in the UK. I hope with the assistance of the Levelling Up agenda, we will start to see more underutilised retail accommodation throughout the most deprived areas of the UK be purchased and then repurposed for place-based impact investing. Many thanks for your time.
Thanks, Charlie. Good afternoon, everybody. Fabulous conference and lovely building to be in. I work for British Land, and I'm sure, like many of you in the audience, we all have a corporate sustainability target, corporate sustainability strategy, and in it is some very laudable aspirations about how we're all going to meet our corporate objectives over the next 5, 10, 15 years. I think at British Land for a while we've been pretty clear on our environmental objectives. I think the UK, the world, if you like, through the climate change agenda has coalesced around what our environmental objectives should be, what being a good corporate citizen looks like, and is a globally recognised look and feel and clearly a set of ways of measuring our impact that's well understood, and I think that's to be commended. I think, as you've heard and you'll hear in the panel debate, I'm sure, much less clarity around social sustainability. And I'm in two minds, actually, as to whether or not that's a good or a bad thing. I wouldn't like us to see necessarily get to a point where we all have a perfectly common, consistent understanding of what social sustainability ought to be. Clearly there needs to be some measurement, but there needs to be also some ability for local initiatives, for local character, for local distinction, local circumstances, I think, to be borne in mind when figuring out what our respective approaches are. And that's how we've approached it at British Land. Our environmental objectives are very clear and globally recognised, but our social sustainability strategy is hyper-local in its approach. And the slide that you've got in front of you is a collection of images of what I'm doing as a project not far from here, just over the river in Southwark, where we're delivering a new town centre for the local authority, repurposing a 1989 shopping centre and turning it into a thriving new town centre for the local community. And we're years away from being able to point to a shiny new building, but what we have been doing, and I think is probably something we all would share as an objective, been working over a number of years to set our stall out in terms of what our licence to operate with this local community looks like, what we're shooting for in terms of our contribution to the local economy, in terms of improving local health outcomes. And whilst we haven't got that beautiful, articulate social sustainability benchmark or target, what we have got is what we call a charter, which we've signed with the local authority, which sets out across a range of different themes relevant to Southwark and particularly hyper-local relevant to Canada Water and the Rotherhithe Peninsula, things that aren't right or things that are okay but need to be made better. And our investment and our action and our decisions on what we do at that asset hope to improve those outcomes over the course of our development through passing through to our longer term asset management. So on the top left, you can see a lady at a sewing machine. She is operating in a former Flaming Grill unit on the shopping centre site, and she's starting her own business. She's here in a building that's being run by a local partnership called Thrive, an organisation we have funded to help local people and local SMEs flourish and mature into being businesses that in time, when our development is ready, will be able to occupy, hopefully, some new space. Beyond that, the slide shows you some examples of getting young people into construction, people who would have never otherwise felt that construction was a pathway or a career for them. And across the rest of the slide, some good examples, I think, of how we've engaged the next generation into starting to reimagine what this town centre means for them, where their aspiration sits in terms of career paths. They've helped us design the public realm. They're shamelessly helping us build the public realm in some cases. So there is no one kind of aspect of how we consider social sustainability. Moreover, a series of different interventions across employment, across well-being, across education and others that we think neatly defines how we're thinking about sustainability within this overall charter that I mentioned we've signed with Southwark. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Emma. So Chris Santa from Schroders, another global real estate fund manager. So I guess one of the disadvantages of being penultimate is some of this has already been covered, but we'll try and add some new information. So social inequality and climate change have been key concerns for many investors for a number of time. The social inequality in the UK, we think, has been exacerbated by COVID and now the cost of living crisis. And so this will hit, we think, some of the poorest households in the country. And there are a number of deprived areas across the UK. If we could flick on to the next slide, please, at the risk of, oh, that's me, that's my job. At the risk of sounding like Chris Whitty. So there are a number of deprived areas across the UK. As we can see here from the chart, these are across the former northern industrial belt. They're also part of the rural areas of the UK, but also in the south, in parts of London and Bristol. And it remains the sad and unfortunate truth that someone living in some of the poorest wards in the UK has a healthy life expectancy 20 years less than someone living in the most affluent wards of the country. And it really just gets to sort of highlights to us some of these concerns. We've also seen that early years education, to take another metric, early years education is a subject which is either not accessible across large parts of the country or is not taken up or appreciated across large areas of the country. And a number of studies have shown that actually children leaving or joining school who've never had the benefit of early years education can leave them struggling behind some of their peers in terms of their development and learning. And so this was a very interesting chart for me in the bottom right-hand corner of the recent survey of GCSE results across the country. I personally would never have thought that educational achievement across the country also comes with regional disparities. So the Schroders Capital Real Estate Fund is designed to enable our clients to invest in real estate which has both a financial impact but seeks to address some of these commercial concerns, some of these social concerns, sorry. And we do that through a process and by adopting a strategy of place-based impact investing. On the left-hand side of the chart here, this is actually some analysis that's been done by the government. This is quite widely used and understood in government and healthcare circles, that the living and working conditions of people throughout the country can really have an impact on their health and well-being. And as we've heard from Sarah and the team, we've heard about some of the place-based investing that we will be looking to undertake, particularly with a focus on housing and regeneration. So the strategic objectives of our fund will be to invest in the town centres and the communities, and really repositioning some of these town centres and communities to address some of the social needs and social challenges that we've identified, affordable workplaces and affordable homes. And for us, it's this intention and these uses that we're going to invest in which really drives the social impact and the responsible investing that we think that this fund can deliver. Schroders, this is very core to Schroders' mantra as a business and a manager too. It is a core pillar of our sustainability program around people and planet, and we think place-based investing neatly adds the place into that too. And as a business across all our products, equities, bonds and private assets, there is a core drive towards sustainability, which we do believe will deliver over the longer term more sustainable investment returns. So one final point on the fund as I canter through this is really that this process of identifying a need, setting out our intent, and where we invest and what we invest in really pervades our entire process through the fund, through investment sourcing and due diligence. We've developed a scorecard to help our teams find the investments which we think can deliver both financial and social impact. We are in a fortunate position of not having an existing portfolio where we're looking to sort of retrofit social impact. This is something that will be important to us from day one. It is a key part of our approval and governance process. I actually have the joy of 2 investment committees, one for financial returns and the other one for social impact, to make sure we are delivering on this. And post-investment, as part of our asset management, we will continue to measure and monitor, with the help of independent third parties, both financial and social impact, and continue to report that to our investors. So that is a very quick canter through the impact fund from a Schroders point of view and impact investing.
You thought penultimate was hard after all of those. My name is David Johnston. I am a real estate lawyer and partner in a law firm, Wedlake Bell, in the city. I'm going to talk about people. We haven't really spoken about people. And if you look at the levelling up agenda and some of the research that's been done after the government's levelling up PR campaign, we're going to talk about the last 3 days another time, a lot of talk has been about north-south. In reality, the research is saying it's about social mobility as well, if not most important. So top 3 in PwC's research in terms of levelling up was better quality and better housing. But then the next two were help people get access to better paying jobs, invest in people to equip them for the future world of work. So I know my slide that you're looking at doesn't say that. Where are you in there? Where do you want to be? I think it's pretty binary, personally. And I don't think we're in a position now as a country and as an industry where we can stand still. But it's your choice which way you want to go. I had to do a graph. This is Goldman Sachs. You've seen it already from the other guys. We are pretty rubbish at this. We are rubbish at allowing people to improve themselves. We are rubbish at investing in people unless those people look, sound, or are a bit like us. Right, show of hands, you're all being a bit static. Has anyone heard of the term contextual recruitment? It's quite funny because I've done a bit of research. We've got a couple of hands, lots of coffee being drunk. Don't want to get people wet. Contextual recruitment, lots of your businesses are using it. I think you might need to ask the question of your HR teams. It's basically instead of when applications or CVs come in and it says they went to a non-private school or they were from they had a background in social care or came from care backgrounds. Instead of that being a red flag and them going out of the pile, that's now a green flag. Because actually, if they've hit the other metrics that get them through the door of your application process, but they've done it from a background of not having the privilege that some of us have had, then you should be looking at those people because they could be the people that drive your business forward. Bit of a hypocrite coming from me. I'm a city lawyer. We still use Latin a lot, which is not good. But actually, we are the people with the power in our organisations to create and foster change. And that could be the most powerful thing you do in your business and in your projects in the whole of your career. This isn't Wedlock Bell doing some virtue signalling. I would imagine everyone in the room are doing something. You wouldn't be sitting here listening if you weren't interested. Just want to talk about the 10,000 black interns. We had one of their group came into us in the summer. I'm one of the trustees of the Revo Educational Trust. As Stuart kindly said, we've got funding places for your team now. Social mobility, getting people that haven't been to university, going and doing a diploma at university. What better advert for your firm if you support them? But Angel came in and actually helped us draft the application form to rid it of bias, to rid the process of how we're going to look at those applications as trustees. It was mind-blowing for me because certain words that I thought, oh yeah, that's normal, were a barrier to somebody applying. And that's the thing we need to get in our mindsets. We need to think about it. I did promise I'd be quick, Vivienne. Right, the last slide is purely to get that slide of the jumper and the green jeans. So I had to get it in there. I remember when work casual came into the city, and it was terrifying. Because the partners looked like they'd walked off golf courses in the 70s. You had the Pringle jumpers, you had red cords. And as somebody coming in going, how do I fit in? That was terrifying for me. How terrifying is it for somebody to come into the workplace now and see that as the uniform? If you've gone to a school that actually wearing a suit isn't what you do, if you're the first person in your family that's been to uni, if it's your first job or you're an apprentice, what are you going to do? You can spend your first cheque on a suit? So I think the last point I'd just like to make is be intentional, be disciplined, but if we're not intentionally thinking about our culture, we will be conformed to it without us ever knowing it's happening to us. My last challenge, go upstairs, look around the room, and see if anyone looks out of the ordinary. They might be the person you want to have a chat to.
Super, thank you. Okay, so we have covered this subject from the macro right the way through to the micro. So thank you all very much for those presentations. Really diverse range of thoughts there. I think one thing that perhaps we should just focus on before we really get stuck in, Sarah, social value, social impact. Two different terms used interchangeably. Is there a merging of the two? Does it matter?
I mean, I think to some extent there is a merging of the two. I think traditionally one may have seen social value, in practice being, perhaps looking at how one could increase local employment opportunities, perhaps through who you engage as a contractor or partnering with community organizations. Whereas impacts, in the bigger scheme of thinking about impact is how do we really intentionally help tackle societal problems. So I think this more targeted approach to how do we invest in deprived areas and can real estate opportunities be found there that are both investable and can really help turn around places is sort of, I would say, one step on from social value. But I think, in the round, everybody's aiming for the bigger, I would hope, ambition that we live in a good society where everybody thrives.
Yeah, so it's almost like a question of scale. Okay, good. Thank you. I think that's quite an important place to start. So Emma, the UN Principles for Responsible Investing, they promote integrating social responsibility into investment decisions. What does being a responsible business mean to British Land?
Well, I said in my remarks earlier, we think of it as our license to operate. I think our investments in places are very rarely new places. They are locations with an existing community, with a backstory, with a community that may want to see change, but there is inherently a value to the place as they know it. And so for us, we take it very seriously. We do spend the time. You saw the example at Canada Water, to get to know the local area, to get to know the local community. We very early establish our partnerships locally. I think we accept, certainly in our experience, that our ability to invest can't be done without establishing local partners to help us execute it successfully. So all of the examples at Canada Water are us working with established local charities, local startups and SMEs. And I think in doing that, you do demonstrate to the local community an effort to understand and to reflect the needs of the particular place and its circumstances, but also a willingness to work with others to help execute it successfully. So no single location has the same approach. You kind of hopefully got that from my remarks, but we do take it incredibly seriously. I think it's as important as our environmental objectives, and I think the industry particularly has come a huge way in terms of its reputation and its impact. And I think social sustainability done well is a great opportunity for all of us, I think, to move our reputation on further still.
It's good to hear. So you're a mega business. You've got 53 acres at Canada Water. Tim, you're sitting next to Emma and you're thinking, whoa, it's all right for her. She can do that. Tell us how you apply those same principles, because you're a big business, but you're not on the scale.
Yeah, that's right. So we need to take the opportunities where we can. So I think there's two ways that we can really sort of work that sort of force for good. The first is obviously investing with people like Charles, where we want to invest into regenerating town centres and bringing that type of investment and the same sort of mindset into regenerating town centres from scratch. I think the other way that we can do it is working with our existing investors, where they invested into these shopping centres a long time ago with mainly sort of financial outlooks on what their outcomes should be. Working with them to sort of get them to understand the importance of holding those assets and how they can maximise social impact from them is what we're sort of trying to get them to do, and it's taking them through that journey of understanding their responsibility of holding assets in town centres that we're really sort of trying to focus on.
Interesting. So I suppose both of you, Emma and Tim, do you find that you're pushing the investors, these guys outside, or are they pushing you?
Well, I think you can probably split them quite easily into two groups. Mm-hmm. So we have our local authority investors that we work with who, it's very high up on their agenda to create or maximise social impact in their assets. And we have an example of an asset that we've recently onboarded that, in the asset management agreement we have with them, we have 12 KPIs where we're going to be judged annually on the impact that we're creating. So making sure that we are creating good jobs for people at the shopping centres, employing locally, et cetera, so that we can maximise the impact that we make. And then the other side of it is investing with more sort of institutional investors where the majority of them, people on this panel accepted, the majority of them aren't really thinking about the social impact that they can be creating. They are still thinking from that background of maximising value without really giving it much of a thought. I think we are seeing it starting to change, and a number of investors that we've worked with for a long time are now starting to look to us to come in and talk to them about, what is this thing, social impact, and how can we work with you to implement it in part of our strategies.
Okay, and Emma, is that your experience?
Well, certainly at Canada Water, we brought in a 50% side-by-side investor recently in the form of Australian Super, and a big part of their interest in Canada Water and subsequently making the decision to invest was the ability to create a market, to generate long-term stable returns for their pension fund, but fundamentally the way of doing business and the way of achieving that was to be investing in something that could properly demonstrate it was going to create real social value. So absolutely from our side. Mm-hmm. I suppose just while I've got the floor, I think it's also worth saying that investors can see that actually it's what the customers are looking for too. I think increasingly with my officer's hat on, we're finding businesses who want to choose where to locate their new workforce, where to locate their new office, wants to understand the community they're likely to be part of, very keen to understand how their staff can play an active role in that. So I think it's both from the investor but also the customer. Interesting.
So, Charlie and Chris, sounds like you're in the forefront here, which is great to hear. That's what you want to hear. It's fair to say that project appraisals are still weighted towards traditional economic returns. So how do you navigate that tension between profit and social impact and the cynicism that it's probably still out there to some extent? I think we've heard a bit of that from what Tim said.
Happy to go first. When we launched the Urban Real Estate Fund, we were focused on returns, but the investors we spoke to were mainly UK based, mm-hmm. either local pension fund or quasi-government. And I think it came through the sort of feel-good factor a little bit to say, look, we can both get returns and both help improve local communities. So, and it's sort of evolved over the last 3 years where we've been going through the journey, the local stakeholder engagements, where we've just been implementing a lot more public-private partnerships, engagement. When it comes to the more detailed focus on the most deprived locations in the UK, I will pass to Chris because we're not there yet.
Okay.
So,
Chris, looking for the deprived locations.
No, well, there you go. Well, I mean, for us, actually, I don't find a tension between financial returns and social impact. I think from a macro Schroders point of view, we genuinely believe that responsible investments made with the community in mind will be more sustainable in the longer term. if there is a short-term cost, I think it will be more than made up for in the longer term. But I think also, as I mentioned earlier, when you have that intent to address a need or a problem, and given the sort of investing we're doing in terms of the uses and the locations, over 65% of the fund will be invested in areas of above average deprivation. I find that on the ground, when we're doing these appraisals, the needs of the community and investors are often heavily aligned. So it's something that I don't feel we have to have that trade-off.
That's great to hear. So do you both think that we're going to be seeing more of this in commercial real estate across the board?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah? And what's going to push that?
Well, for me, the need's still out there. I mean, from a human point of view, aside from my professional point of view, I mean, the need is still out there. There's, I think, 1 million households in England alone waiting for support with housing at the moment. Median house prices in the UK are 8 times the median income, whereas 20 years ago they were 4 times. There is a real need in housing, and to sort of steal someone else's phrase, one of Tim's colleagues said to me the other day, we just have too much retail and too little housing. And so really, I just still believe there's a need for that transition to be made.
And I think, just following up on that, I think the research which Sarah's done, and the amount of money which is from local authorities which is being invested outside of the UK, if we can get even 10% of that within the UK, you will see a huge change to the most deprived areas of the UK. And that's where I think the main bulk of the capital will come in the next few years.
Okay. So, of course, if we've been doing this for the last sort of 10, 15, 25, maybe 30 years, we wouldn't be in the position we're in now with the sort of maps of deprivation that we've been looking at today. So, clearly, there's been things that have been getting in the way of achieving these sort of outcomes. Sarah, you produced a report for ULI for the ESG in real estate. What were the sort of systemic challenges that you were finding were barriers to what we're all talking about here?
Yeah, so we did this report a couple of years ago, and I mean, I think the 3 things that came up. One was actually the culture of the real estate industry and behaviour. I mean, I'm not saying the representatives are here now, but that there was this sort of financialisation of real estate. A lot of money was going into higher returning asset classes, so student accommodation, older people's care, retail, high-end resi in city centres that may have been driving growth, but not inclusion. So underinvestment in the things that probably matter most to people, like affordable homes and decent town centres. So I think that was seen to be a cultural challenge. So reconnecting, to place was really important. So it's great to hear everybody talking the way they're here. And the second thing was silos, the sense that there are lots of, in the real estate industry is very fragmented. So you've got so many different actors from, local authorities, and even within local authorities, different departments will be involved, planning, the different departments. Then you've got architects, developers, development consultancies, the developers, the investors, and that there wasn't really an alignment necessary across all those actors around sort of this shared social, I like your social sustainability goal. So I think that need to develop that shared purpose, which would drive market behaviours. And then I think the third thing was the need really, and we felt there was much more of this in Europe than actually in mainland Europe than in the UK, was public-private partnerships. That in the UK there's quite a lot of distrust really between the city and local authorities. Don't really believe it. They're in it for anything other than the money, or the developers are just in it to make money. And that and I know that's not the truth, and there's lots of great schemes out there, but just a feeling of we could do more with public-private partnerships that work for both sides. Yeah,
interesting. So, David, we were pinning quite a lot of hopes on levelling up, weren't we?
We were.
So what now?
Well, to be honest, Vivienne's being a bit naughty because I get on myself. I hate the phrase levelling up. I think it creates an assumption that it's geographical, or it creates the assumption that to be good, I've got to be like somewhere else, where I think everyone's been speaking about it. It's about the individual places. So, soapbox, rant over. I think, yes, we do have a different style of government. We've got a chancellor that is wanting. It's a bet, isn't it? It's quite a big gamble on growth. If it comes off, he will be seen as the messiah, basically. But I think the things that we need to not lose from actually, if you go down into the detail of what levelling up was, it was empowering local areas to improve their area. And if you have a look at it really won't take you long because there's not much detail in it, but in the government's fact sheet on the investment zones that are being announced, the 38 zones are all around the country. And so they reflect the maps that we've seen today. So it's not dead. I think reports of the death of levelling up have been slightly exaggerated, but it's a great headline. I think always look at where your properties are and what can be improved and how you can improve and work with the communities. And it's that collaboration that you've all been speaking about, which is absolutely key, and hope that growth works.
David, thank you. I'm being given little signals which indicate that we need to come to an end. I think we could continue this conversation for some time because it's deep, it's broad, and it's desperately important. What I hope we have done is we have demonstrated how we as an industry can create better life experiences for people, because fundamentally this is all about people. And we've heard about the different approaches that are being taken in order to achieve those outcomes. So just before I thank this fantastic panel, can we get this slide back up just to check that we're still at 100%?
Why? It's not going to get any
Just to check
better.
we're still at 100% because that's what I said we're going to do and say we're going to do it. Are we?
I think it's more people might.
More people. Yeah. Just to answer that again.
Never work with children or IT.
Yeah, great. Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. I think we should all be really encouraged that is our general perception, that we came into this room with this perception, and I hope that the experience that you've had listening to these conversations and hearing what these various businesses are doing has actually deepened and enriched that, and actually given us a stronger sense of purpose that this is the role of this industry to be taking forward. So if I can please thank our fantastic panel.